The notion of being content in solitude is a powerful and often overlooked virtue. Too often people chase after relationships, external validation, or distractions to fill the emptiness within. But I tell you, true joy is not found in the applause of others or in the busyness of company. It is found in the quietude of your own soul, when you can sit still and know that you are enough just as you are. In today's world, it is far too easy to become addicted to the approval and recognition of others. The endless cycle of seeking validation can be an exhausting pursuit that only leaves us drained and dissatisfied. Every like on social media, every compliment, every moment of attention becomes a fleeting source of comfort that we unknowingly become dependent upon. Yet these external affirmations are never enough to fill the deep void within. The truth is, when your happiness hinges on what others think or how often they validate you, you lose sight of your inherent worth and value, as well as the preciousness of your own company. When you seek constant validation, you place your sense of self-worth in the hands of others. The opinions of others can easily sway you, causing a turbulent emotional life that fluctuates with the winds of others' thoughts and feelings. One day you might feel loved and valued, basking in the glow of someone's approval, and the next that approval is withheld, leaving you feeling empty and inadequate. The problem with this dependence is that it makes you a slave to the whims of others, and you can never be truly free or content in this state. Real happiness doesn't come from others, it comes from knowing who you are and being confident in your identity, regardless of others' perceptions. This constant need for validation is rooted in a lack of internal security. When you are unsure of who you are, you look to others for definition. You may find yourself waiting for someone to tell you that you are enough, beautiful, capable, or worthy. This dependence erodes your ability to stand firm in your own convictions and beliefs. You may begin to doubt yourself when you are not immediately met with approval, and thus you compromise your values, trying to fit the mold that others expect of you. The problem, however, is that external validation is fickle. It is inconsistent and unreliable, and over time it will only leave you more desperate for affirmation. It's like drinking water from a leaky cup. No matter how much you drink, the thirst never ceases. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to begin cultivating self-contentment, learning to find joy in solitude, and developing an internal sense of validation that does not rely on others. Only when you discover your worth and confidence in Christ and your own heart will you be able to face life with an unshakable peace, regardless of the external noise. When you begin to embrace solitude, you give yourself the chance to reconnect with your own inner self. The constant external chatter diminishes, and you can begin to hear your own thoughts. In these moments, you come to realize that you do not need anyone's approval to feel whole. You are complete in yourself. Solitude is not a punishment, nor is it something to fear. It is a space where you can get to know who you are, separate from the opinions of others. It is a place of quiet strength and reflection, where your identity is no longer tethered to the ever-changing views of those around you. Learning to be content alone is not about shutting others out, but rather about nurturing your own well-being and independence. When you are able to stand alone, emotionally and spiritually, you will discover that the need for validation weakens. You are able to express your opinions freely, live according to your values, and pursue your passions without constantly wondering if you are doing it right in the eyes of others. There is freedom in this independence because you no longer need permission from the world to be yourself. This does not mean that you should stop seeking healthy relationships or cut yourself off from others entirely. What it means is that your sense of worth should not come from others, but from the inner peace that you cultivate in your own heart. In these relationships, you will no longer expect people to fill your emotional needs, but rather you will have the strength to give freely of yourself because you are already whole. When you rely on external validation, you miss out on the deeper and more lasting fulfillment that comes from the satisfaction of knowing you are enough, just as you are. You don't need to be constantly affirmed by others to feel valued. The truth is that you were created for greatness, and you carry the immeasurable value of being made in God's image. You are already worthy, and there is no need to chase after fleeting praises that only serve to satisfy momentary desires. Embracing solitude means you begin to find joy in the moments spent with yourself, reading, reflecting, and connecting with God. The more you nurture your relationship with God, the less you will seek approval from the world. His love is constant, unchanging, and unconditional, and in His presence you will find the acceptance you've been searching for all along. Your true worth and value are anchored in Christ, and as you begin to acknowledge and internalize this truth, your need for the approval of others will fade. Self-contentment is not about rejecting the need for community, but about understanding that you can stand firm without the constant reliance on others. It is about finding peace in the quiet moments of reflection, prayer, and introspection, where you can hear God's voice speaking life and purpose over you. When you stand in this quiet confidence, you no longer need to shout for attention, because you know that your significance is rooted in something much deeper than the opinions of the world. In the end, to embrace solitude is to trust in the sufficiency of God's love and to recognize that your worth is not dependent on the fleeting affections of others. It is in this sacred space of self-contentment and solitude that you can begin to live with true freedom, no longer enslaved by the need for validation. Instead, you will find joy in who you are, knowing that in Christ you are enough. The fear of being alone is a common struggle, especially in a world that places high value on constant connection and social interaction. It is easy to get caught up in the belief that being alone means being unimportant or unloved. This fear can manifest in many forms: anxiety, loneliness, restlessness, and may even drive people to seek constant companionship, distraction, or noise. However, the reality is that solitude is not a punishment, it is an opportunity for personal growth, reflection, and deepening our relationship with ourselves and God. Learning to embrace solitude can bring a peace that is not dependent on others, but rather rooted in the security of knowing who you are and who you belong to. At the core of the fear of being alone is often a deep-seated insecurity about one's worth. Many people are afraid that if they are alone, they will be forgotten, abandoned, or that their presence will go unnoticed. This insecurity leads to an unhealthy dependency on others for validation and affirmation. It's as if being around people or constantly being in relationships is the only way to prove that one's life has meaning. However, this mindset leads to a never-ending cycle of dependence, where your sense of worth is tied to others' acceptance of you. The truth, however, is that your value is not defined by your relationships, but by the fact that you are a beloved creation of God. The fear of being alone can also be an emotional response to past experiences of rejection or abandonment. For those who have suffered from broken relationships, loss, or emotional neglect, solitude can feel like a return to those painful experiences. The absence of others can stir up feelings of loneliness and unworthiness. But in those moments it is important to recognize that solitude does not equate to isolation. In fact, it can be the place where healing takes place, where you learn to confront the fears and lies that fuel the anxiety, and where you find peace in knowing that you are never truly alone. God promises that He is with you always, even in the quietest moments of solitude. When we are afraid of being alone, we often fill the silence with noise distractions such as social media, television, or mindless conversations. We use these distractions to avoid facing the discomfort of being still. Yet in doing so, we miss out on the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and with God. Solitude, when embraced, becomes the fertile ground for spiritual growth. It is in the quiet that we hear the still, small voice of God, where we can reflect on His truth and experience the fullness of His presence. The peace that comes from God is not the absence of noise, but the presence of His Spirit in the midst of it. Solitude allows us to listen to our thoughts, our hearts, and our deepest longings. In the rush of daily life, we often drown out our own inner voice as well as God's voice by filling every moment with activity. But when we are alone, we are given the space to discern the condition of our hearts, to examine our motives, and to realign ourselves with God's will. It is in solitude that we come face to face with ourselves, not the masks we wear or the personas we project to others, but the true self that God sees. Here we can confront our fears, our wounds, and our hopes, knowing that God meets us in our vulnerability and guides us through our weaknesses. Learning to find peace in solitude is not an overnight process. It requires intentionality and practice. It is a gradual journey of shifting from a mindset of fear and avoidance to one of acceptance and trust. It begins by acknowledging that solitude is not a punishment but a gift. In solitude we are invited to be still and to rest in God's presence, knowing that we do not need to seek external validation to feel loved and accepted. God is always with us, and His love is constant, never dependent on how much we do or how many people we are surrounded by. This truth is liberating. It frees us from the fear of being alone and invites us to enjoy the peace that comes from being in God's presence. The peace found in solitude is not dependent on our circumstances, but on our relationship with God. It is in solitude that we can deepen our intimacy with Him, hear His voice more clearly, and experience the joy of His fellowship. When we learn to rest in God's presence, we can find contentment in being alone, because we know that we are never truly alone. God is our constant companion, and His love fills the void that the world cannot. In the quiet moments of solitude, we can experience the fullness of God's peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that can calm the most restless heart. One of the greatest benefits of learning to be alone is the ability to cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness. Solitude allows us to reflect on our lives, our choices, and our relationships. In the busyness of life, it is easy to lose sight of our true desires, goals, and values. But when we are alone, we are able to gain clarity and perspective. We can evaluate whether we are living in alignment with our purpose and whether we are making choices that honor God. Solitude, therefore, becomes a tool for personal growth and spiritual maturity, enabling us to walk more faithfully in the path that God has set before us. The fear of being alone often leads people to seek validation from others. We can become so fixated on how others perceive us that we lose sight of our true worth. Yet it is in solitude that we come to understand that our worth is not defined by others but by God's love for us. We are made in His image, and that alone is enough. The truth is that you don't need others to validate your existence because you are already seen, known, and loved by the Creator of the universe. Once you internalize this truth, the fear of being alone dissipates, and you can embrace solitude as a place of peace and renewal. Solitude also fosters the growth of resilience. In the quiet moments of being alone, we learn how to navigate discomfort, how to sit with our feelings, and how to find strength in our own company. This resilience is a crucial skill in life. It teaches us that we are capable of enduring hardship without needing to rely on others for emotional support or validation. It helps us to stand firm in our identity in Christ, knowing that our worth is not contingent on external circumstances. When we face trials and challenges, we can draw from the strength of knowing that God is with us, even in our loneliest moments. Ultimately, learning to find peace in solitude is about embracing the beauty of being who we are, apart from the opinions and judgments of others. It is about trusting that God is sufficient for our every need, and that in Him we find a peace that is unshakable and unchanging. Solitude becomes a sacred space, a place of rest and renewal, where we can hear God's voice, reflect on our lives, and grow in our relationship with Him. When we learn to embrace solitude, we discover a freedom that the world cannot offer, and we find peace in knowing that we are never truly alone. Furthermore, learning to enjoy your own company fosters emotional resilience. When we are alone, we learn to manage our emotions without relying on others to do it for us. The ability to sit with your emotions and process them is a crucial aspect of emotional maturity. Solitude teaches you how to handle difficult emotions such as sadness, anger, frustration, or fear without being overwhelmed by them. This emotional resilience is essential for building a healthy relationship with yourself and others. Instead of running from uncomfortable feelings or seeking constant external distractions, you learn to acknowledge and process them in a way that leads to emotional healing and growth. Solitude also allows you to tap into your creativity and inner potential. When we are constantly surrounded by people or distractions, we rarely have the mental space to explore our own thoughts or passions. It's often in solitude that we discover new interests, develop new skills, or reignite old dreams. Being alone gives us the time and freedom to explore our own creative potential without judgment or interruption. Whether it's writing, painting, learning a new language, or simply reflecting on life's deeper questions, solitude opens up a world of possibility that is otherwise hidden by the noise of external life. The Bible speaks to the importance of solitude and stillness in cultivating a deeper relationship with God. Jesus himself often withdrew to solitary places to pray and seek communion with his Father. He understood the value of solitude in strengthening his spiritual life and sharpening his focus. When we struggle to enjoy our own company, we are also missing out on the opportunity to grow in our relationship with God. God often speaks in the quiet, in the moments when we are still enough to hear his voice. By embracing solitude, we make space for God to reveal more of himself to us and for us to grow in our faith. Learning to enjoy your own company also allows you to be less reliant on the approval or company of others for your happiness. It enables you to experience peace and contentment, regardless of your relationship status, social circles, or external circumstances. When you can be at peace with yourself, you no longer need others to complete you or validate your worth. This freedom allows you to engage with others in a more authentic and genuine way, without the pressure of seeking approval or trying to impress. Your joy and fulfillment come from within, not from the fleeting external factors that often drive our sense of identity. Over time, learning to enjoy your own company leads to a greater sense of self-sufficiency. While human connection is important, we are not meant to be dependent on others for our happiness or fulfillment. God has created us to find contentment in him and in the person he made us to be. In solitude, we can rediscover our true selves, free from the influences and expectations of others. This self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolation or disconnection from others, but it does mean being rooted in God's love and secure in our own identity. Lastly, the ability to enjoy your own company strengthens your sense of independence and personal integrity. When we are comfortable being alone, we no longer feel the need to conform to others' expectations or opinions. We are able to make decisions based on our own values, beliefs, and convictions rather than seeking approval from others. This independence is not about rejecting relationships or community, but about finding strength and clarity in who we are in Christ. It enables us to live authentically and follow God's will for our lives without being swayed by external pressures. Over-attachment to relationships can be one of the most subtle yet damaging pitfalls in our emotional lives. It often begins innocuously with the natural human need for companionship, love, and connection. However, when that need becomes a source of dependence rather than something healthy and mutual, it can lead to an unhealthy over-attachment. This overdependence on others for emotional fulfillment and identity can rob you of the ability to experience joy and peace in your own life, independent of external validation. When relationships become the primary source of happiness or self-worth, it signifies a deeper issue that needs to be addressed. The fear of loneliness is a powerful force. Many people consciously or unconsciously enter relationships out of a deep fear of being alone. While companionship and connection are essential aspects of human life, the need to be constantly surrounded by others can be indicative of an underlying fear of isolation or abandonment. This fear can lead to over-attachment, where the presence of others becomes the only way to feel secure or validated. But the truth is that your worth and happiness should never be contingent on someone else's presence. True fulfillment comes when you can stand firm in your identity and contentment, regardless of your relationship status. Over-attachment to relationships is also often linked to a lack of self-contentment. When you feel incomplete without the affirmation or company of others, it's a sign that you may not have yet discovered the depth of joy and peace that can come from within. Self-contentment doesn't mean isolation or cutting people off. Rather, it means being able to enjoy your own company, to find joy in your own presence, and to feel at peace with who you are without needing external validation. When your sense of worth is solely dependent on your relationship with others, you create an unstable foundation for happiness. Relationships come and go, but true joy comes from the inside out. Another danger of over-attachment is the potential for unhealthy dynamics in your relationships. If you enter relationships out of fear or desperation rather than genuine connection, you risk creating an imbalance. This can lead to codependency, where one person becomes overly reliant on the other for emotional support, decision-making, and even identity. The relationship becomes less about mutual love and respect, and more about survival or fear of abandonment. Over time, this imbalance can foster resentment, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. No relationship should be built on fear or desperation. A healthy relationship is one in which both individuals stand strong on their own and come together to share love and life, not out of necessity but out of desire. Over-attachment to relationships can also manifest in unhealthy boundaries. When you fear loneliness, you may be more inclined to tolerate behaviors that do not serve you well or that go against your values. You might find yourself accepting poor treatment, neglecting your needs, or compromising your values just to keep someone around. This is a dangerous place to be, as it erodes your sense of self-respect and dignity. No relationship, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, should cause you to sacrifice your well-being. If you find yourself making excuses for others' behavior or compromising who you are to hold on to someone, it's time to reevaluate why you're holding on to that relationship. One of the most insidious aspects of over-attachment to relationships is that it can lead to emotional manipulation. When you rely too heavily on someone for your happiness, they can unknowingly or deliberately use your dependence against you. The person may not even be aware of the power they hold over you, but your emotional dependence on them becomes a tool they can use to influence your actions and decisions. Over time, this can lead to a pattern of manipulation, where one person exerts control over the other through guilt, fear, or emotional pressure. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect and love, not on manipulation or control. When you're over-attached to relationships, you also lose sight of your personal growth and development. The focus shifts from your individual needs, goals, and aspirations to the needs and desires of others. While it's natural to care for the people around you, over-attachment can lead to neglecting your own growth. You may find yourself compromising your dreams, passions, or ambitions to fit into someone else's vision. The beauty of life is that it's meant to be lived with a sense of purpose and personal fulfillment. If your entire identity is wrapped up in others, you may find yourself adrift, unsure of who you are or what you truly want out of life. The constant need for validation through relationships also stunts your ability to make decisions confidently. When you fear being alone or being without the approval of others, you may find yourself relying on others' opinions to make choices, even the most basic ones. This dependence leads to a lack of self-trust. It can also lead to indecision and anxiety as you constantly second-guess yourself, wondering if your choices are acceptable to others. You may even sacrifice your own desires or goals in order to align with someone else's expectations. True confidence and peace come when you can make decisions grounded in your own beliefs and values without needing others to approve. The inability to enjoy solitude can also be a sign of over-attachment. People who rely heavily on others for their happiness often struggle to find comfort in being by themselves. Solitude becomes a source of discomfort, loneliness, and anxiety. The fear of being alone can make you seek out constant distractions, whether that be in relationships, social media, or entertainment. However, the ability to enjoy and embrace solitude is essential for personal peace and growth. It is in solitude that you can truly reconnect with yourself, reflect on your goals, and find strength within. When you find yourself overly attached to relationships, you may also notice a deep sense of unfulfillment that persists, even when surrounded by others. You may be in a room full of people, yet still feel lonely, unimportant, or disconnected. This is because the root of your happiness is not in the external relationships, but in your internal peace. You cannot find lasting fulfillment in others if you haven't first found it within yourself. It is only when you are content and whole within that you can truly appreciate the relationships in your life, as they will no longer be the source of your happiness but an enhancement of it. In conclusion, over-attachment to relationships is often born from a fear of being alone or a lack of self-acceptance. It stems from the belief that your worth is dependent on external validation, rather than the internal peace and confidence that comes from knowing and accepting yourself. If you find yourself clinging to relationships out of fear of loneliness, it's time to rediscover the joy and fulfillment that comes from within. Cultivate self-love, practice solitude, and remember that your worth is not defined by the presence of others, but by the peace and purpose that you find in your own heart. Many people unknowingly fall into the trap of believing that a relationship is the key to their happiness and sense of worth. From a young age, society often promotes the idea that being in a romantic relationship is the ultimate form of fulfillment. This belief can become deeply ingrained, leading to the idea that without a partner one is incomplete or lacking. However, the truth is that true happiness and contentment come from within, not from external circumstances or the presence of another person. Relying on a relationship to feel whole is a dangerous mindset that sets the foundation for dissatisfaction, emotional dependency, and even heartbreak. When we look to others to fulfill the deep longing for purpose, joy, and self-worth, we lose sight of who we are and the unique value that we possess as individuals. A relationship, no matter how wonderful, cannot provide the validation or inner peace that comes from knowing and accepting yourself. While partnerships can certainly enhance life and bring joy, they should never serve as a source of identity. If you are constantly seeking external validation to feel complete, you are bound to feel empty and unsatisfied, no matter how fulfilling the relationship may seem. The idea that you are incomplete without a partner creates an unrealistic and unhealthy standard for happiness. No one should feel that they need another person to be whole, as this fosters emotional dependence rather than healthy interdependence. It places an immense amount of pressure on a relationship, turning it into something that must fix you, rather than something that enhances your life. This mindset can lead to unhealthy attachments, where you rely on the other person to fill voids that only self-awareness and personal growth can heal. No relationship, no matter how loving or supportive, can bear the weight of fulfilling every emotional or spiritual need. It is important to recognize that being single does not equate to being incomplete or unworthy. In fact, it is often in solitude that we are able to reflect on who we truly are and develop a deep sense of self-love. When we rely on relationships to define us, we miss the opportunity to grow as individuals. It is through personal development and self-reflection that we cultivate our strengths, passions, and character. Being single allows us to reconnect with our true self and build a solid foundation of self-worth that does not depend on external factors like romantic relationships. The longing for a partner to complete us also often leads to unhealthy attachments and a fear of being alone. This fear can drive us to settle for relationships that do not serve us or to remain in toxic situations simply to avoid the discomfort of solitude. We may find ourselves in relationships where our needs are not truly being met, but because we feel that we cannot live without a partner, we overlook the red flags. This fear of being alone is not a reflection of true desire for companionship, but rather a manifestation of insecurity and a lack of self-acceptance. When we tie our sense of fulfillment to having a partner, we also fail to recognize the richness and beauty that can come from being by ourselves. Singlehood is an opportunity for growth, reflection, and self-discovery. It is in this time of solitude that we can strengthen our relationships with God, nurture our personal passions, and focus on our own healing and development. By embracing singlehood, we learn to become comfortable with who we are and embrace the idea that we are complete on our own. We do not need anyone else to define our worth or purpose. There is a deep wisdom in the notion that we must first love ourselves before we can fully love another. The love that we seek in a partner should not be an escape from our own emotional voids, but a reflection of the love that we have cultivated for ourselves. When we learn to love and accept ourselves, we are able to enter relationships as whole individuals, bringing something valuable to the table rather than seeking someone else to fill gaps within us. A healthy relationship is one where both individuals complement each other, not one where one person depends on the other for emotional fulfillment. The desire for a relationship is not inherently wrong. However, when that desire becomes an obsession or an expectation that you cannot be happy without it, you risk losing yourself in the process. Seeking companionship is natural and part of our human experience, but it should never come at the expense of your own well-being or sense of self. If you feel incomplete without a partner, it is essential to pause and reflect on what it truly means to be whole. Begin by identifying the sources of your fulfillment and building them within yourself. Whether through personal growth, spiritual development, or pursuing your passions, there are many ways to experience a sense of wholeness that does not depend on the presence of another person. Another important factor to consider is that relationships come and go, and placing all of your happiness in the hands of another person sets you up for disappointment when things inevitably change. Life is unpredictable, and relationships can end for many reasons, often beyond our control. If you have built your happiness on the existence of a partner, the end of that relationship can leave you feeling devastated and lost. On the other hand, when you cultivate inner peace and self-contentment, the shifts in relationships, whether positive or negative, do not define your happiness. You remain secure in your worth, knowing that no one person can complete you because you are already whole. The realization that you are not incomplete without a partner is liberating. It allows you to enter relationships from a place of strength rather than dependence. When you understand that your fulfillment comes from within, you are free to choose relationships that align with your values, passions, and life goals. You are no longer motivated by the need to fill an emotional void, but by a genuine desire to share life with someone who complements and supports you. True partnership arises when two people come together not out of a need for completion, but from a mutual desire to grow, love, and serve one another.